Welcome to the debate. Before we jump right into today's analysis, just a quick reminder. If you are watching us on the NFL Nexus channel, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and comment on what you thought of today's discussion.
Yep, we love reading those comments.
We really do. We want this to be dynamic, fun, and interactive. And hey, become a channel member and get exclusive content and perks. Just click the join button below.
Lots of great stuff in there for members.
Absolutely. So let us get into the actual football now. Malik Nabers is out.
Yep.
Wan'Dale Robinson is gone. And in just a matter of weeks, the New York Giants are going to ask their second-year quarterback, Jackson Dart, to step onto an NFL field with a gaping hole in his offense.
It is a massive hole. I mean, the underlying math of their passing game simply does not work right now.
Exactly. The pressure is mounting. The situation is stark, right? You have a young, developing quarterback who desperately needs reliability. And on the flip side, you have a drastically overhauled, highly crowded receiver room that suddenly lacks its primary gravitational force.
And that vacuum couldn't happen at a more precarious time in a quarterback's life cycle. I mean, year two is where you either process the game at an NFL speed or you just get swallowed by it entirely.
Right. Which brings us to the central question emerging from the front office analysis we are dissecting today. Should the Giants sign 32-year-old veteran free agent Stefon Diggs, who, by the way, recently made a very public pitch asserting he remains the best number 2 receiver in the league?
He certainly does not lack confidence.
Never has, but should they sign him as an immediate high-volume fix, or is the Giants' drastically overhauled receiver room already equipped to handle the loss of Nabers?
Right. Because I look at Jackson Dart dropping back to pass in week 1, and I see a player who cannot survive with a patchwork committee. Signing Stefon Diggs isn't just some intriguing option, it is a short-term imperative to protect Dart's development.
Well, I come at it from a completely different way. The Giants have already aggressively, and I would say adequately, insulated this roster under new head coach John Harbaugh.
You really think so?
I do. They've built a very specific ecosystem relying on drafted rookies, versatile tight ends, and newly signed veterans. That blend makes a high-usage, aging player like Stefon Diggs entirely redundant. Adding him now would actually disrupt the exact developmental environment the Giants are trying to foster. Let's start with the reality of what it means to develop a young quarterback, because that has to be the prism through which every single roster decision is viewed.
Sure.
When a second-year quarterback like Jackson Dart walks up to the line of scrimmage, he is trying to decode complex, disguised coverages. He needs certainty in his progressions. And while the Giants have brought in a staggering number of bodies this offseason, none of them provide the structural certainty of a proven high-volume alpha target.
I mean,
someone who can instantly command defensive attention. Look at the empirical evidence from last season. Stefon Diggs, coming off his own ACL injury, still posted 85 catches for 1,013 yards and 4 touchdowns with the New England Patriots.
right, with Drake May.
Exactly. He proved definitively that he can be a reliable safety blanket for a young quarterback. He gives Dart a definitive open window in the intermediate passing game while Nabers rehabs.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the actual mechanical philosophy of the offense John Harbaugh is installing?
I mean, I have, but
If you look at the sheer volume and type of their offseason acquisitions, it points to a very specific strategy. They traded up in the 3rd round to draft Malachi Fields. They signed Calvin Austin III to operate out of the slot.
right.
And they brought in an entire veteran tier with Odell Beckham Jr., Juju Smith-Schuster, and Darnell Mooney. They aren't trying to replace Malik Nabers with one player. They're utilizing a highly functional committee approach designed for a 12-personnel system.
Actually, let's pause there. Explain that 12 personnel shift for a second, because I think that's where the friction really lies in this debate.
Yeah, glad you brought that up. So 12 personnel means you have 1 running back and 2 tight ends on the field at the same time.
Right.
For the Giants, that is Theo Johnson and their new addition, Isaiah Likely. When you have 2 tight ends, mathematically, you only have 2 wide receivers on the field.
Sure.
So you don't need a target-demanding veteran soaking up those limited reps. You need the highly specialized pieces you've already assembled to execute distinct roles. Diggs, who is nearing 33 years old, represents an unnecessary luxury. He inherently clashes with a heavy 2 tight end rotation where receivers are frequently asked to block and play off play action.
I see why you think that a committee can mathematically absorb the loss of a WR1, But let me give you a different perspective. Relying on a committee of aging veterans and unproven rookies to replace Malik Nabers is like putting 5 spare tires on a car and expecting it to drive at highway speeds.
Oh, come on, that is a bit of an exaggeration.
No, really. Dart needs one reliable structural pillar. Diggs explicitly stated that no team has a better number 2 receiver than him, and looking at this Giants roster, he is absolutely right. An aggregate of WR3s and WR4s does not equal a true WR2.
But they aren't spare tires, they are...
Asking role players to replace an alpha target is like asking the percussion section of an orchestra to play the melody because your first-chair violinist is injured. They might be talented musicians, but they just don't have the instrument for the job.
I see where you're going with this.
Dart needs a primary read whose route running literally dictates safety alignments. When Diggs stems a route inside, the deep safety has to respect it. That changes the geometry of the field for the quarterback.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. The orchestra analogy implies everyone is out of position, but modern NFL offenses are highly compartmentalized. A committee is incredibly effective when the roles are distinct and complementary.
If they actually complement each other, sure.
They do. Take Darius Slayton. People hyper-focus on his occasional drops, but if you look at the tracking data, he has been highly consistent over the years at manipulating the outside boundary and threatening the defense vertically.
Okay. Vertical threat, yes.
Now combine Slayton's outside speed with Calvin Austin III. The source material notes Austin was primed for a massive breakout campaign in the slot in Pittsburgh before poor quarterback play derailed it.
Right. That was a tough situation for him.
Exactly. So think about the geometry you just mentioned. Slayton runs a vertical clear-out, pulling the boundary corner and the deep safety. That naturally vacates the underneath zone for Austin's elite short area quickness. You have the field stretched vertically and horizontally, filling the necessary roles without needing a singular target hog like Diggs.
A target hug?
Yes, a player who historically requires a 25% target share to simply stay engaged in the football game.
But those distinct complementary roles only function if the players execute them consistently on third down. And that brings us to the veteran crop the Giants have acquired to supposedly anchor this room. You mentioned they brought in Beckham, Smith-Schuster, Mooney. They also added Braxton Berrios.
Which actually brings up the reality of the 90-man roster construction. The Giants roster right now is just incredibly bloated.
It is crowded.
They have 6 bubble receivers: Isaiah Hodgins, Jalen Hyatt, Xavier Gibson, Dalen Cambray, Bo Collins, and Ryan Miller. Those guys are fighting tooth and nail just to make the 53-man roster by contributing on special teams as gunners or returners.
Right. Special teams is huge for those bottom of the roster guys.
And Stephon Diggs does not play special teams. If you bring him in, you are throwing another aging player into an incredibly saturated room, forcing the front office to cut younger, cheaper players who actually contribute to the game's third phase. You are losing field position value just to add redundancy to your offense.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. You are valuing theoretical roster depth over actual on-field production.
It isn't theoretical if they play on special teams.
But the reality of the NFL is that if you are a bubble player fighting strictly for a gunner spot, you aren't a viable starting receiver. You cannot rely on special teamers to get open on 3rd and 6 when the pocket is collapsing around Jackson Dart.
Well, no, that's what the veterans are for.
But as for those veterans you mentioned, Mooney, Beckham, and Smith-Schuster, the source material is explicit. They have all struggled to make a consistent impact in recent years. They are theoretical assets at this stage of their careers.
I wouldn't call them just theoretical.
Diggs, by contrast, is in a what-if. He just crossed the 1,000-yard mark last season. He is a functioning, high-level asset in a room completely filled with variables.
But those variables, Beckham, Juju, Mooney, provide the exact same veteran leadership and schematic understanding that Diggs would, but with one crucial defining difference.
Which is?
They do it without demanding that the entire passing offense run through them. We have to talk about gravitational pull here. Diggs is historically a player who requires massive volume to maintain his rhythm.
He's a WR1. That's what they do.
But when you have a young quarterback like Jackson Dart, you want him dropping back, reading the defense post-snap, and throwing to the open man based on the progression of the play.
If you bring in Stephon Diggs, the psychological pressure on a second-year quarterback to force-feed his veteran receiver can actually stunt his processing.
You think Dart would just force it?
Absolutely. Dart might bypass an open Calvin Austin underneath just to force a contested ball to Diggs to keep him happy. The current veterans provide a safety net without that ego-driven gravitational pull.
I really think you are vastly underestimating how beneficial that gravitational pull is for a young quarterback's processing speed.
How does forcing the ball help processing?
Because when the pocket is collapsing and there is an unblocked edge rusher bearing down, a second-year quarterback doesn't have the time to scan his fourth progression to see if Juju Smith-Schuster has finally found the soft spot in his zone.
Well,
He needs a panic button. He wants to know pre-snap that his primary read has the route-running leverage to separate from man coverage instantly. Diggs does that. His gravitational pull is exactly what simplifies the game for Dart.
I still think it's a risk.
But beyond the veterans, we really have to look at how signing Diggs intersects with the youth movement John Harbaugh is trying to implement, specifically regarding Malachi Fields.
Exactly. And that is where the Diggs signing conceptually falls apart for me. You have to question the logic of paying an aging receiver a premium salary when the front office is explicitly leaning into a youth movement.
But do they conflict?
They absolutely do. Look at Malachi Fields. The Giants didn't just casually draft him. They traded up to secure him in the 3rd round. He is projected in camp right now as a Tier 1 likely starter.
Which is a lot of pressure.
Sure, but if you add Stephon Diggs to the depth chart, you are directly blocking Fields from getting the Week 1 live game snaps he desperately needs to learn NFL coverages. You cannot simulate regular season processing speed in practice. By bringing in Diggs, you are sacrificing tomorrow's foundational piece for a marginal upgrade today.
See, I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes development only happens through a trial-by-fire scenario. Throwing a rookie into the fire as a primary target isn't always the best way to develop him. Often it just ruins his confidence.
But he has to play to learn.
Yes, but I would argue that having Stephon Diggs actually accelerates Malachi Fields' development. Think about the coverage dynamics. When Nabers is out, if Diggs isn't on the field, opposing defensive coordinators are going to roll their bracket coverage toward the rookie, Fields. They are going to dare him to beat double teams.
He's a physical guy. He might be able to handle it.
But with Diggs, Fields can simultaneously compete with and learn from him without the crushing, immense pressure of being the focal point of the passing game in his very first month in the NFL. Diggs' presence stabilizes the offensive environment so the youth movement can progress naturally rather than by force.
I hear that, but we have to bring this back to the broader structural philosophy of the team Harbaugh is building. This isn't the pass-happy, spread-it-out offense of the past. The team is fundamentally shifting to a heavy gap scheme running game.
Right, with Maui Goa.
Exactly. They just drafted Francis Mauigoa in the 1st round to play right guard and pull on power concepts. The entire identity of this offense is going to be physical blockers, running the football, and leaning on that 12 personnel with Likely and Johnson.
Which goes back to your earlier point.
Right. In a gap scheme, run-first offense, the wide receivers are going to be asked to crack block linebackers and ding out safeties in the run game. You simply don't need a high-volume finesse receiver soaking up cap space in that system.
So Diggs doesn't fit the culture?
You need physical blockers and young moldable talent growing into that specific physical identity. Stephon Diggs does not fit the physical profile or the willingness of an inline blocker in a power run game.
Okay, but every run-heavy team, no matter how physical they are on early downs, eventually faces 3rd and 8.
Sure, that's just football.
When the opposing defense inevitably stacks the box with 8 men to stop Mauigoa and the gap scheme run, who is Jackson Dart throwing to? Play action is great, but in obvious passing down situations, you need a reliable short and intermediate route runner who can manipulate leverage, win at the line of scrimmage instantly, and keep the chains moving so you can get back to running the ball.
The committee can do that.
But Diggs is elite in the intermediate game. His route tree perfectly complements a power run team that needs to convert on 3rd and medium. However, there is a physical reality to Diggs that we do have to address based on the material, which is the injury context.
Right, the ACL factor. And this is where the risk matrix just flashes red for me.
Explain why.
Because Stephon Diggs is an older player with his own recent ACL injury history.
If the entire premise of your argument is that Malik Nabers is out with an ACL injury, and the Giants therefore need absolute certainty, banking the vital first month of your season on a 32-year-old post-ACL receiver is incredibly contradictory.
Is it, though?
Yes. You are essentially trying to replace one unpredictable ACL recovery timeline with another, much older ACL recovery timeline. And the medical data tells us that soft tissue compensations, hamstring pulls, calf strains often follow major knee surgeries as players age into their mid-30s. You are paying a premium for an insurance policy that might physically break down in week 2.
I see the surface level irony there, but we really have to look at the actual evidence from last season to reframe that injury context. Diggs isn't currently rehabbing an ACL. He already returned from his ACL injury.
True. He did play last year.
He played on it last year. He ran his routes. He cut. He absorbed contact, and he succeeded to the tune of over 1,000 yards. The tape exists. We saw the knee hold up.
But the risk of re-injury is still there.
Malik Nabers is the one whose timeline is entirely unpredictable right now. We don't know how a dynamic, explosive, twitchy player like Nabers will respond to live game speed in his return. Diggs is the known commodity. He isn't the risk. He is the proven insurance policy providing vital cover for the completely unknown timeline of Nabers.
But an insurance policy that costs significant cap space and roster capital isn't always worth the premium, especially when you've already bought coverage elsewhere.
You consider the committee coverage?
The Giants have insulated themselves against Nabers' absence not by buying one massively expensive aging insurance policy, but by diversifying their portfolio. That's exactly what the committee is. It is risk mitigation across the entire roster.
How so?
If Sleeton tweaks a hamstring on a deep route, Austin is there to take on the speed role. If Mooney underperforms against press coverage, Field steps up to use his physical frame. You have multiple failure points before the offense completely collapses.
But a diversified portfolio of penny stocks doesn't equal a blue-chip asset. And when you are developing a franchise quarterback, you cannot rely on penny stocks. You need blue-chip assets on the field, because the margin for error for a second-year quarterback is razor thin.
Unless the blue-chip asset demands so much attention and structure that it completely skews the development of the rest of the portfolio. Dart needs to learn to execute Harbaugh's power run play-action system. He needs to read the field horizontally and vertically, not just predetermine his throws to force the ball to a veteran who demands it.
It is a fascinating divide. As we look at the totality of what the Giants are facing, my perspective remains rooted in the fragility of the quarterback. I maintain that while the Giants have undoubtedly made numerous moves and added a high volume of specialized bodies to their receiver room, Stefon Diggs is the only available player who guarantees the high-volume short and intermediate route reliability that this specific offense currently lacks.
I definitely hear your point on reliability.
A developing quarterback like Jackson Dart requires a definitive structural safety blanket while his primary weapon, Malik Nabers, is sidelined. Diggs proved last year in New England that he can absorb that exact workload for a young quarterback and keep the offense moving.
And my position remains that the Giants have already built a highly resilient, modern offensive ecosystem that makes Diggs unnecessary. They are utilizing varied, specialized receiver skill sets to stretch the field, promising rookies like Malachi Fields who need vital reps, and a heavy two tight end scheme with Isaiah Likely and Theo Johnson that fundamentally changes the math at the line of scrimmage.
It is a totally different philosophy.
Exactly. John Harbaugh is building a physical, gap scheme team. Bringing in an expensive, aging receiver who demands a massive target share is an unnecessary addition that would only disrupt an already crowded roster and take valuable developmental snaps away from the youth movement they've heavily invested in.
Well, I think the one point of absolute convergence here is the immense pressure currently resting on Jackson Dart's shoulders.
Oh, no doubt.
With or without Stefon Diggs, missing an explosive talent like Malik Nabers for the first month of the season is a monumental hurdle, and John Harbaugh certainly faces a massive challenge in managing the sheer volume of this crowded offensive roster, figuring out how the 53-man math works, who gets the specialized snaps in 12 personnel, and who ultimately ends up contributing on special teams.
Absolutely. It is a textbook case study in roster construction and offensive philosophy. Do you take the macro-philosophical approach,
trusting your drafted youth, the complementary roles of your committee, and your overarching schematic shift toward a power run game?
Right.
Or do you take the micro-pragmatic approach, prioritizing the immediate, week-to-week safety blanket for your young quarterback, regardless of how it impacts the depth chart?
And that is the ultimate dilemma facing front offices every single year. When the definitive centerpiece of your passing game goes down, do you trust the diverse array of specialized pieces you've carefully assembled in the offseason to step up and execute their roles?
It is tough.
Or do you go out and acquire a proven, undeniable asset, even if it forces you to alter your long-term blueprints? We will leave the ultimate decision of whether Stefon Diggs belongs in Giants blue up to you, the listener. It's a question of team-building philosophy as much as it is on-field football strategy. Thank you for joining us, and we'll leave you to ponder just how much schematic weight a rookie quarterback can bear before the offense inevitably stalls.